Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a single image, etched with painstaking precision over 5 centuries ago, yet it feels like it holds a secret conversation with the modern mind. It's dense, filled with these enigmatic symbols, and features this central figure just lost in thought, almost burdened by the sheer weight of intellect. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into one of the most enigmatic and deeply symbolic artworks in history, Albrecht Dürer's 1514 copper-plate engraving, Melancholia the First. And look, this isn't just a beautiful print, it's really a packed stack of sources, a visual essay on the human condition, loaded with layers of meaning that stretch from the ancient world right through the heart of the Renaissance. Our mission for you today is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from this incredible piece. We want you to understand not just what it shows on its surface, but what it means for the human spirit, for creativity, and why it continues to captivate us across the centuries. Think of it as a shortcut, maybe, to truly being well informed about a masterpiece that speaks volumes about our own struggles and aspirations.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is how Dürer managed to synthesize an entire era's philosophical, scientific, and spiritual thoughts into just one single, intricately detailed image.
That's
It's
all.
almost as if he compressed a library of Renaissance ideas into, well, a few square inches of copper. We'll explore the radical transformation of the concept of melancholy itself, how it shifted from being viewed solely as, a physical ailment to something far more profound, maybe even a celebrated intellectual state, and how this very work, this engraving, encapsulates that pivotal shift in human understanding.
Right. So let's set the stage then. When we look at Melancholia side, what exactly are we seeing? I mean, why is it considered such a monumental work, not just in Dürer's output, but in the entire sweep of art history?
Well, at its core, Melancholia First is a copperplate engraving. Albrecht Dürer created it in 1514. But, to simply call it an engraving, while technically correct, dramatically undersells its significance. It's not just a technical marvel, though it absolutely is that. It's universally considered one of Dürer's three master engravings, or Meisterstich, as they're known. That's alongside Night, Death, and the Devil, and St. Jerome in his study. These three works, created around the same period, are renowned not just for their extraordinary artistic brilliance and technical mastery, but fundamentally for their immense intellectual depth and spiritual inquiry. They really represent the absolute pinnacle of Dürer's printmaking artistry and his philosophical engagement with the big questions of existence.
So it's not merely visually stunning, though it is, but it's packed with ideas. It's almost like a visual philosophy textbook for the Renaissance mind, isn't it? Inviting us to really read the image.
Precisely. It truly embodies a profound dual nature, which is, I think, a hallmark of Dürer's genius. On one hand, it's a breathtaking pinnacle of technical mastery in the art of engraving. The precision, the minute detail, the control of light and shadow achieved through countless fine lines. It's simply unparalleled for its time. He set new standards for the medium. But on the other hand, it's a profoundly symbolic, multi-layered work. Every single element, from that large central figure right down to the smallest, seemingly insignificant tool lying on the ground, contributes to a larger, intricate narrative about the human condition. This is a visual allegory, really. A puzzle waiting to be solved.
And it's far more than just a collection of random symbols, isn't it? It feels deeply personal to Dürer himself, reflecting his own philosophical world, but it's also incredibly intertwined with the prevailing scientific, philosophical, and religious understandings of the 16th century, like a composite portrait of an era's mind.
Absolutely. Think of it as a microcosm of Renaissance thought, a single frame capturing the intellectual ferment of an entire age. And a crucial aspect of its significance lies in its direct engagement with the concept of melancholy itself. You see, before this period, and still largely during it, melancholy was widely seen as a purely spiritual or physical affliction. A negative temperament caused by an imbalance of humors, something to be cured or avoided. But Melancholia marks a significant reinterpretation, a profound shift. It actively participates in this emerging idea of melancholy transforming into, well, maybe even a desirable intellectual state, a characteristic, even a prerequisite, for profound thinkers, creative minds, and great geniuses. It takes a concept once associated with sickness and dignifies it, seeing it as a source of deep insight.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, this piece isn't just a snapshot of an artist's personal feelings. It marks a critical transition. moving melancholy beyond a mere medical condition to something far more complex, multifaceted, and in some influential circles, even celebrated as a mark of genius. It's like the intellectual community of the Renaissance was reclaiming and, I don't know, rebranding a centuries-old affliction.
That's a great way to put it, a rebranding, yes.
So to truly appreciate the layers of melancholia, we need to understand the world Dürer lived in. Who was Albrecht Dürer, this paramount artist, and what was the artistic and intellectual landscape of the 16th century Renaissance like, especially in Northern Europe, which, let's face it, sometimes gets overshadowed by the Italian masters?
Right. Albrecht Dürer, born in 1471 and living until 1528, was indeed a paramount figure of the Northern European Renaissance. Hugely important. He was born and based in Nuremberg. Now, Nuremberg might not immediately spring to mind for Renaissance art like Florence or Rome, but it was in fact a thriving hub. It was a free imperial city, a commercial powerhouse known for its intellectual vibrancy, its innovative craftsmanship, and crucially, its leading role in the burgeoning printing industry. This environment meant Dürer was just exposed to a constant flow of new ideas, texts, and images. It was a real melting pot. And what makes Dürer so utterly unique and his work so resonant is his incredible ability to synthesize these disparate cultural currents. He drew deeply from the established Northern European Gothic traditions, think intricate detail, meticulous realism, a strong emphasis on religious symbolism, a focus on the observed natural world, and a certain profound, sometimes unsettling mystical quality. But at the same time, he was avidly absorbing all the groundbreaking new ideas coming from the Italian Renaissance. He was like a sponge for these things.
And his travels to Italy were absolutely crucial for that synthesis, weren't they? I mean, he wasn't just hearing about these ideas, he was immersing himself, right?
Absolutely. Dürer undertook two significant journeys to Italy. The first in 1494-95 and later in 1505-07. These were transformative experiences for him, no question. He didn't just visit. He actively studied the works of Italian masters like Bellini and Mantegna. He absorbed their innovations in perspective, human anatomy, classical proportion. He brought back with him that profound classical heritage, the rediscovery of ancient Greek and Roman aesthetic and philosophical values, the emphasis on ideal forms, harmonious compositions. This synthesis of Northern Gothic meticulousness and Italian humanist ideals is absolutely fundamental to the technical excellence and the profound intellectual depth you see in all his mature work, and especially in Melancholia the Thirst. He literally became a bridge between these two powerful artistic and intellectual traditions.
And this wasn't just any period either. This was truly the age of discovery, wasn't it? A time of massive upheaval and new knowledge flooding in.
It was indeed an era of unprecedented expansion, a true paradigm shift. The 16th century was a period of vast geographical discoveries, new continents being charted, leading to a radical reorientation of the European worldview. Scientifically, it was a time of groundbreaking insights that would challenge long-held beliefs, from Copernicus's heliocentric model slowly gaining traction to Vesalius revolutionizing anatomical understanding. Culturally, it was just bursting with innovation, most notably the dawn of the Reformation, which profoundly reshaped religious and political landscapes across Europe, challenging traditional authority and emphasizing individual interpretation. And crucially for art, there was a profound shift in humanity's perception of nature itself, moving from a more symbolic, almost allegorical view to a really keen interest in empirical observation, measurement, and understanding the world around them through direct experience.
So art was reflecting this new way of seeing and thinking, trying to capture this expanding universe with both precision and profound meaning.
Exactly. We see the growing importance of linear perspective, meticulous anatomical studies, and a deeper engagement with natural observation becoming paramount in art. Artists weren't just illustrating stories anymore. They were trying to capture the world with scientific accuracy, while still embedding profound meaning and intellectual puzzles within their works. Dürer, with his insatiable curiosity and brilliant mind, wholeheartedly embraced and implemented this classical heritage and scientific rigor into his own artistic practice after his journeys south. He was a keen observer of nature, a meticulous draftsman, and also a theorist who actually wrote treatises on proportion and perspective.
But you mentioned a dialogue, maybe even a tension between these northern and southern influences. How did that specifically play out in Dürer's work and in Melancholia of Way?
Well, while the Italian Renaissance was flourishing with its rational classicism, its rediscovery of perfect human forms and harmonious proportions, Northern Europe still maintained a strong, vibrant connection to medieval mystical and symbolic thought. It hadn't gone away. There was this pervasive sense of the hidden meanings in the world, a fascination with allegory, numerology, alchemy, esoteric knowledge. a search for spiritual truth that sometimes existed in tension with the new empirical and humanistic approaches. Dürer, positioned perfectly between these two powerful currents, didn't just choose one over the other, he consciously combined them. He recognized the power of both the rational and the mystical. He saw value in both. And this is why Melancholia Mist is such a masterwork in this context. It's a perfect example of this dialogue. It incorporates the intellectual philosophy and the new scientific understanding of the Renaissance, evident in the geometric tools and the precise rendering, but it also just overflows with layers of mystical symbols and a profound contemplative depth that roots it firmly in the Northern European tradition. It's a bridge, connecting these seemingly disparate worlds into a cohesive, incredibly rich, and enduring artwork. He created a truly hybrid intellectual space, reflecting the complex, sometimes contradictory intellectual currents that were swirling around him in 16th century Europe.
That's a crucial foundation. Now, before we actually dissect the image itself, let's really unpack the concept of melancholy, because to our modern ears, it often just means, a feeling of sadness, maybe a bit gloomy. But historically and philosophically, it was far, far more complex than that, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Our contemporary usage of melancholy often simplifies it way too much, just to a feeling of gentle sadness or gloom. But its historical and philosophical roots are incredibly deep, complex, and multifaceted. It goes way back to ancient Greece. It begins with the pioneering medical thinkers like Hippocrates and Galen, who formulated the pervasive four-humor theory. This prevailing medical and philosophical framework that posited that the human body contained four primary fluids or humors. There was blood, yellow bile, black bile or cara safra, and phlegm. The balance of these humors was believed to determine a person's physical health, emotional temperament, and even their predisposition to certain diseases. It was foundational to medicine for centuries.
And black bile was the key one for melancholy, right? Cara safra. It sounds a bit, unsettling.
Precisely. Melancholy was specifically linked to an excess of cara safra, or black bile. In this ancient context, if you had too much black bile, you would exhibit characteristics of melancholy. And this was seen as both a physical and a psychological state. It manifested as a depressive temperament, lethargy, a tendency towards solitude, or even a predisposition to certain illnesses. So initially, it was largely understood as a medical affliction, a bodily imbalance that needed correction, often through things like purges, bleeding, or dietary changes. Though it's interesting, Aristotle actually posed the question way back in his Problemata, something like, why is it that all those who became eminent in philosophy or politics or poetry or the arts are clearly melancholics? So that hints at the dignification of melancholy much, much earlier.
Wow. Okay. So from being a medical problem to be purged, how did it evolve into something potentially profound, maybe even desirable?
That's where the fascinating shift occurs, moving from the Middle Ages into the Renaissance. During the medieval period, melancholy was largely viewed negatively. It was often associated with acedia, which is basically spiritual sloth and considered a deadly sin. However, as the Renaissance dawned, propelled by the rediscovery of classical texts, the understanding of melancholy was radically reinterpreted. It wasn't just seen as a disease or a simple physical imbalance anymore. Instead, it began to be recognized as a characteristic, almost a prerequisite, for certain kinds of minds, specifically creative and profoundly contemplative minds.
And this is where towering figures like Marsilio Ficino, the great Neoplatonic philosopher, come into play, essentially reframing the entire concept, right?
Exactly. Marsilio Ficino, a hugely influential Neoplatonic philosopher of the Florentine Renaissance, was instrumental in this reinterpretation, particularly through his monumental work, De Vita Triplici, 3 books on life, published back in 1489. Now, for our listeners, Neoplatonism in this context was essentially a vibrant revival of Plato's ideas, but infused with Christian mysticism and Renaissance humanism. It emphasized the ascent of the soul towards divine unity and intellectual enlightenment. Ficino, drawing on this tradition and rereading Aristotle, viewed melancholy not as a purely negative force to be overcome, but as a potential source of divine inspiration and a hallmark of truly great geniuses. He believed that those born under the influence of Saturn, the planet associated with black bile, were particularly prone to melancholy, but also uniquely gifted with the capacity for profound thought, artistic talent, and even prophetic insight.
So it became almost like a badge of honor then, a sign of intellectual depth and sensitivity for the intellectuals and artists of the time.
In a way, yes. It signified a mind capable of deep introspection, of grappling with complex philosophical ideas, and of achieving profound intellectual insights. Ficino even offered specific, often astrological and dietary advice for melancholics to manage their temperament and channel their black bile into divine inspiration. He effectively provided a practical handbook for cultivating genius from an affliction. This understanding dramatically elevated melancholy from a mere illness to an intellectual, an artistic, and even a mystical experience. It became associated with profound insight, artistic talent, and philosophical depth, especially amongst humanists and artists who saw themselves as divinely inspired.
But it wasn't a purely positive transformation, was it? It still had its dark side, this kind of double-edged sword aspect.
Precisely. It was a potent duality. Thinkers like Cornelius Agrippa and his De Ocula Philosophia on occult philosophy, published in 1531, articulated this dual nature very clearly, even expanding on it. Agrippa divided melancholics into three types, each progressively more elevated: the imaginative, the rational, and the spiritual. While the first might lead to madness, the latter two, especially the spiritual melancholic, could achieve profound insights, even prophetic abilities, by ascending to higher intellectual planes. However, he also strongly acknowledged that this very profundity could simultaneously restrict the melancholic, leading to inertia, despondency, a crushing sense of isolation, and an inability to act. It made melancholy both a source of immense creative power and a profound personal challenge. A noble sickness, if you will, but a sickness nonetheless. And this rich, complex, and often contradictory philosophical backdrop is what Dürer directly connected to and masterfully embodied in Melancholia first. He didn't just draw a sad person. He visually synthesized these incredibly nuanced and often contradictory ideas about melancholy. Every single object, every posture, the very atmosphere in the engraving, speaks to this deep intellectual tradition, inviting us to ponder the very nature of genius and its cost.
Okay, that's fascinating context. Now let's talk about the medium itself. Melancholy of Stora is an engraving, which, as you said, is an incredibly demanding and unforgiving art form. How did Dürer's technical genius elevate this piece from simply a picture to, well, a profound statement?
This is where Dürer's unparalleled skill truly shines. It sets him apart as arguably the greatest printmaker of the Northern Renaissance. Just incredible technique. For those unfamiliar with the specifics, engraving is a precise and highly laborious technique. An artist uses a sharp, specialized steel tool called a burin to meticulously incise or carve fine lines directly into a polished copper plate. These incised lines then hold ink, and when dampened paper is pressed onto the plate under immense pressure, the image is transferred, creating a print. It's highly precise and, as you said, unforgiving because, unlike drawing or painting, there's no erasing or painting over mistakes. Every line carved is permanent.
So it demands incredible foresight, precision, and an unshakable hand. It's not just about drawing lines, it's almost like sculpting them into the metal.
Exactly. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And Dürer's prowess in this medium was legendary. He mastered the burin to an extent that allowed him to render details with absolutely incredible, almost microscopic precision. You can discern every fold of fabric, every single strand of hair, every nuance of texture, from the rough stone to the smooth skin, with astonishing clarity. And this wasn't just about showing off his dexterity. This precision was absolutely crucial for embedding the myriad layers of symbolic information that make Melancholia so rich and complex. He knew his audience would scrutinize these prints, lean in close.
And how did he use that precision to create the powerful, almost somber atmosphere that permeates the piece? Because the feeling of introspection and gravity is palpable, isn't it?
That's a key characteristic that Dürer exploited in engraving: its capacity for exquisite control of light and shadow transitions. By varying the density and direction of the lines, using closer, darker lines for deep shadows, and looser, fewer lines for highlights and midtones, Dürer could create incredibly subtle gradations of tone. Even though the final print is in stark black and white, the tonal range is amazing. In Melancholia I, he masterfully utilized both the multitude of linear details and this profound depth of tones to create a powerful, deep, almost oppressive atmosphere. The strong black and white contrast doesn't just define forms. It actively generates a mood, a palpable sense of gravity, introspection, and maybe even a certain claustrophobia, trapping the viewer in the melancholic's burdened mind. He was a pioneer in what we call hatching and cross-hatching. Dürer didn't just lay down parallel lines. He crisscrossed them at various angles, layering them with such finesse that he could achieve an unprecedented range of tonal values. Notice, for instance, if you look closely, how the deep shadows beneath the angel's figure are rendered with multiple layers of cross-hatching. It creates this velvety, almost tangible darkness that had rarely, if ever, been seen in prints before. This technique gives an extraordinary sense of volume and depth to the figures and objects. It truly amplifies the central figure's physical and internal gravitas in her, well, overwhelming struggle.
So The technique itself isn't just a means to an end, it directly contributes to the emotional and intellectual impact of the piece. It becomes part of the message. The precision needed to create, it mirrors the precision of the intellectual pursuit it depicts, maybe.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic insight. The technical standard Dürer set with this engraving was completely revolutionary, not just for his time, but for centuries to come. His use of the burin, the depth of his carving, the sophistication of his shading, and the masterful arrangement of his composition all established new benchmarks in the art of engraving. He pushed the medium beyond mere illustration into a realm of profound artistic and philosophical expression. He created a sense of realism, texture, and emotional depth that had rarely been seen before in prints. He showed how a print could be as complex and meaningful as a painting, reaching a wider audience through its reproducibility. He essentially unlocked the full potential of engraving as a fine art.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. We're going to break down the actual image element by element because every single detail in Melancholia tells a story, right? A crucial piece of Dürer's complex visual poem. It's like a Renaissance scavenger hunt for meaning.
Indeed. It's not just a collection of objects, it's a meticulously constructed universe of meaning, carefully arranged to convey a very specific intellectual and emotional state. Dürer was an absolute master of symbolic language.
Let's start with the central figure then. She's large, right in the middle, and while she looks almost like an angel, there's a distinct weariness about her, isn't there? Not the typical joyful, ethereal quality you might expect.
You're absolutely right. This central figure is monumental, dominating the foreground, and does indeed appear angel-like with those prominent wings. Yet she seems profoundly weary, deeply contemplative, almost burdened by thought. This figure is the direct allegorical embodiment of melancholy itself. Notice her posture. She's slumped, chin resting heavily on her hand. That's a classic pose for contemplation or dejection throughout art history. Her large wings are present, suggesting the capacity for flight, for soaring thought, for divine inspiration, but they are inactive, almost limp. They signify a lack of movement, an inability to ascend or act. And the pensive, slightly hopeless, perhaps even exasperated expression on her face is a direct, powerful visual reflection of the melancholic state, lost in profound, perhaps overwhelming thought, seemingly paralyzed by its weight and lacking the impetus to move or create.
It's not just the figure, though. She's surrounded by this incredible array of objects, almost like a chaotic intellectual inventory scattered around her. Let's look at the geometric and mathematical tools first. The ruler, the compasses, a plane, even a sphere, they're right there in the foreground, quite prominent.
Those are absolutely critical. They are not merely props. They are powerful symbols of the Renaissance's fervent belief in human reason, science, and the power of mathematics to unlock the secrets of the universe. They express the deep desire for measurement, for calculation, for understanding the underlying order of the cosmos. They reflect the era's profound faith in science and mathematics as keys to unlocking the mysteries of the universe, a real hallmark of the new humanism. Yet the way they lie, somewhat scattered, even unused, hints at the melancholic's intellectual struggle. Perhaps a block in the very pursuit of knowledge they represent. The genius is there, the potential is there, but the application is stalled.
And then there's the bell and the hourglass, seemingly suspended in the upper left of the composition. They feel like very direct reminders of time passing.
They are indeed. These are powerful, stark reminders of the inexorable passage of time and the finitude of life. The hourglass, in particular, with its sand steadily running out, points directly to the limits of human existence and the brevity of our time to achieve our aspirations. It adds a profound sense of urgency, and yet, paradoxically, contributes to the melancholic's paralysis in the face of it. That feeling that there's never enough time, or that the time slipping away is being wasted in inaction. The bell, often associated with a summons, or perhaps even a death knell, further reinforces this theme of time's unyielding march.
And right there, on the ground, near the figure's feet, there's a very prominent skull. Can't miss that one.
No, you can't. The skull is a classic memento mori, a Latin phrase meaning remember you must die. It starkly symbolizes the inevitability of death and the transience of life. It reveals the darker, more somber, and ultimately existential side of melancholy. The profound awareness of mortality that can lead to deep introspection, but also to a paralyzing sense of despair or the futility of all endeavor. It's a universal reminder of human limitations, staring right back at us.
There's also a bow and arrow lying loosely on the ground, almost discarded looking. It looks unused, slack.
Exactly. The bow and arrow typically represent human endeavor, the will to achieve goals, to act decisively, or even to defend oneself. They speak to ambition and purpose. However, their slack or unused state in the engraving is highly significant. It indicates that this effort is hindered, that the will to act is stagnant, or that the goals themselves seem out of reach. This directly reflects the melancholic's characteristic inaction, the paralysis that can accompany profound thought, where the mind is active but the body is inert, unable to translate ideas into action.
And the dog, there's a dog just lying there, seems to be sleeping or just inert, curled up at the figure's feet.
Yes, the dog. Traditionally a symbol of loyalty and companionship, here it also frequently symbolizes sleep, lethargy, or even the saturnine temperament associated with melancholy itself. Its inert state serves to underscore the central figure's own immobility and introversion. It suggests a retreat into oneself, a common trait of the melancholic, who is often lost in inner contemplation, detached from the outer world, content, or perhaps resigned to their internal landscape. Some scholars also interpret it as a starving dog, emphasizing the kind of intellectual or spiritual hunger that is left unsatisfied by the melancholic's inertia.
Going back to those wings on the central figure, they're large, almost grand, but definitely droopy, as you said. It's like a bird that's forgotten how to fly or can't quite lift off.
These angel wings are highly symbolic. They typically represent the soul's freedom, its aspiration to ascend to higher realms of knowledge, to achieve spiritual understanding, or to engage in creative flight. They speak to boundless potential. However, their inactive, drooping state highlights the inhibiting nature of melancholy. Despite the potential for uplift and creative flight, the condition itself prevents action or soaring, tying the figure to the earthly plane of profound, yet sometimes stifling thought. It's the paradox of boundless potential tethered by an inner weight.
And we can't miss the various geometric shapes and structures, like that prominent polyhedron in the midground. It almost looks like a perfectly cut diamond or some complex crystal, but it's just lying there, inert like everything else.
Yes, these polygons and architectural objects are absolutely crucial for understanding the Renaissance mind. The polyhedron, often identified as a truncated rhombicuboktahedron or a related geometric solid, represents the human search for order, the drive to impose structure on chaos, and the belief in a mathematical framework underpinning the entire universe. It speaks to the Renaissance's fascination with geometry, perspective, and the rational attempts to understand and master the world. But perhaps the most surprising and ingenious detail, something you really have to look for, is the magic square on the wall, just above the angel's head. Oh, the magic square. Right, that's a true nugget for our listeners. Tell us about that. What's the deal with the magic square? The magic square is fascinating. It's a numerical grid where the numbers in each row, column, and main diagonal add up to the same sum. In Dürer's Melancholia Thirst, the magic square is 4 by 4, and every row, column, and main diagonal sums to 34. What's even more fascinating, just brilliant really, is that the two numbers in the very center of the bottom row are 15 and 14. Put them together. 1514, the year Dürer created the engraving. Now, this wasn't just a clever trick or a signature. It's a profound symbol of cosmic order, intellectual mastery, and the belief that divine harmony could be found in mathematical relationships. Its inclusion here, however, within a scene of intellectual stagnation, might suggest that even ultimate mathematical order cannot fully alleviate the burden of melancholy. It's a subtle, brilliant detail that proves Dürer's profound intellectual engagement with these ideas.
Wow. And finally, the background is quite indistinct and hazy. It's not clearly defined, almost like a landscape shrouded in mist or fog.
That vague, blurry background is a deliberate artistic choice, I think. It represents uncertainty, complexity, and perhaps the unknowable. It suggests that melancholy itself is a complex and often unresolved state of mind, one that isn't clear-cut or easily defined. It's a swirling, often indistinct realm of thought and emotion, mirroring the internal confusion or the boundless yet unproductive ponderance of the melancholic. It definitely contributes to the overall atmosphere of weighty contemplation. What's truly fascinating here when you pull it all together is how Dürer doesn't just show us a melancholic person, but truly the essence of intellectual melancholy. He's using each object as a precisely chosen word in a complex, multi-layered visual poem. Every detail is meticulously placed and carefully rendered to convey a specific, nuanced aspect of this deep, often conflicting state of mind. It invites us, even forces us, to spend hours deciphering its secrets.
So when we pull all these incredibly rich, layered symbols together, what emerges? What's the bigger picture? How do they, individually and collectively, reveal Dürer's profound understanding of melancholy and this complex human experience?
Well, what becomes abundantly clear is that each symbol isn't just a random addition. Not at all. Each is a carefully chosen component of Dürer's deep understanding, blending the prevailing Renaissance philosophy, the burgeoning scientific inquiry, the rigorous mathematical pursuits, and the enduring mystical traditions of his time. He's presenting a visual encyclopedia almost of the melancholic state, as understood in the 16th century. It's a culmination of centuries of thought.
So those geometric tools, the compass, the ruler, the polyhedron, they're not just about being smart or technically proficient, are they? There's more to it.
No, they signify the human intellect's constant, indeed tireless effort to comprehend the universe, to measure its vastness, to calculate its workings, and to seek fundamental order in nature. They speak to humanity's aspiration to master the world through reason and scientific endeavor, which was, as we said, a core tenet of the Renaissance. But their very presence, alongside the figure's apparent inaction, is key. It suggests that this intense intellectual pursuit, when unchecked or overwhelming, can paradoxically lead to a kind of paralysis. The mind is capable of grand calculations, of designing complex structures, yet the will to apply them, to move forward, is stymied. It's the burden of too much thought, perhaps, without enough action.
And the skull and hourglass are pretty stark reminders, right?
Yeah.
They scream mortality.
They do. The skull and hourglass serve as stark, undeniable reminders of inevitable death and life's fleeting nature. They emphasize the concept of vanitas, the ephemeral nature of worldly pursuits. They underscore a profound awareness of mortality, which is often a central component of the melancholic's existential ponderings. This highlights Melancholia's somber, even despairing aspect, the weighty realization of one's own finitude, which can lead to a sense of futility despite intellectual prowess.
Yet the wings on the figure, though drooping, seem to represent something higher, don't they? A desire for transcendence, for flight from these earthly burdens.
Exactly. The wings, even though they are drooping and inactive, powerfully symbolize the human soul's inherent freedom and its aspiration to ascend to higher realms of knowledge, to achieve spiritual or intellectual heights, to create. They speak to divine inspiration and boundless potential, but their immobility and the angel's apparent exhaustion directly connect to the idea of creative block or spiritual paralysis. The very energy and drive that allow for soaring thought or artistic creation are here impeded or blocked by the melancholic state, preventing uplift or decisive action. It's a powerful visual of potential unfulfilled or momentarily stymied, a profound frustration where the spirit is willing but the body and will are not.
And the dog, just lying there, highlights a different kind of stagnation, maybe. A quiet, almost resigned inertness.
The dog's symbolism of loyalty and sleep, in this context, really emphasizes a state of contemplative stagnation, an inward turn. It's not an active rebellion against thought, but a deep immersion in it to the point of inertia. The melancholic is locked in their own mind, withdrawn, perhaps endlessly analyzing without conclusion, leading to a kind of quiet internal standstill. It's a powerful image of being trapped within one's own thoughts, unable to break free and engage with the world.
So when you put all these incredibly rich, layered symbols together, what emerges is this deeply nuanced picture of melancholia as something far more complex than just sadness or genius. It feels like it's about the very struggle of the human mind itself.
Precisely. This rich, multi-layered symbolism portrays melancholy as both an intellectual impediment and a wellspring of creative potential. It reviews its inherent duality. It's a state where profound thought leads to great insights, but also to deep contemplation of the universe's vastness and humanity's limits, which can be profoundly paralyzing. Dürer's mastery lies in capturing this incredible complexity, the fine line between the human mind's vast possibilities and its often overwhelming limitations. It's about the tension between what we aspire to achieve with our intellect and what we are constrained by, whether it's mortality, the bounds of knowledge, or simply a deep inner inertia. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Dürer is showing us that melancholy isn't just a feeling, it's a profound engagement with existence itself. It's the very struggle between aspiring for greatness, for understanding the deepest mechanisms of the universe, and being weighed down by the perceived or actual limitations of the human condition. It's a truly universal human experience that transcends time and culture, I think.
It really feels that way, and it's clear that Dürer's work isn't just about one person's mood or one specific era's idea. How has the concept of melancholy been explored throughout history, in art and philosophy, and how does Dürer's piece fit into that broader, centuries-long narrative? Where does it sit?
Well, the concept of melancholy is truly ubiquitous. It's everywhere once you start looking. It has appeared in various forms across art, literature, and philosophy for centuries, from the ancient Greeks and Romans through the Middle Ages and profoundly into the Renaissance and beyond. It's a recurring theme because it touches on fundamental aspects of the human experience, our intellectual aspirations, our grappling with mortality, our search for meaning, and the burdens that come with deep thought. It keeps coming back because it's part of us.
And the key, as we've discussed, is that enduring dual perception. It's never just one thing, is it? Always this tension.
Exactly. From very early on, as we explored with Hippocrates and Galen, melancholy was perceived as both a physical illness, a humor imbalance, and concurrently, or later, as a sign of creative genius, a temperament associated with intellectual depth and artistic sensibility. This duality is critical to understanding its enduring appeal and complexity. It allows it to be seen as both a curse and a gift. In the medieval period, it was sometimes associated with acedia, spiritual listlessness, but even then, mystics and scholars often experienced a related profound contemplation.
And Dürer's Melancholia Surst isn't just one of many depictions. It really stands out, doesn't it? It feels like a landmark.
No, it's far more than that. Dürer's engraving stands as one of the most significant and certainly one of the most enigmatic visual depictions of this duality in the entire Western canon. Absolutely. It doesn't just show us some melancholic figure. It encapsulates the entire philosophical debate and cultural understanding surrounding the condition at the height of the Renaissance. It's a visual treatise on the subject, a distillation of centuries of thought, and, in a way, a prophecy of future interpretations.
So how did Renaissance thinkers specifically view this melancholy of genius, this idea Ficino championed? And how does Dürer's piece give us a window into that?
Renaissance thinkers, drawing heavily from Neoplatonism, truly elevated the concept to new heights. They often viewed melancholy not just as a mood, but as a great intellectual storm churning within the depths of the soul. That's a powerful image. It was seen as a state that simultaneously challenged the limits of the human mind and, paradoxically, fueled profound creativity. This was precisely because it often brought an individual face-to-face with the vastness of knowledge, the incomprehensibility of the universe, and the limits of human reason. It was considered both a source of immense insight and a deeply draining experience. The very process of grappling with the profound questions of existence, the vastness of knowledge, and the limits of human understanding could induce this state, as if the mind became overwhelmed by its own capacity. And Dürer's artwork is the ultimate visual embodiment of this complex Renaissance interpretation. The immobile figure, despite its potential for action, those large wings, represents the paralysis that can accompany such deep thought. The chaos of thoughts is implied by the jumble of symbols surrounding the figure, the tools of measurement and creation, the reminders of time and death, the magic square hinting at cosmic order, all indicating a mind overwhelmed by the scope of its own inquiry. It all serves as a powerful, enduring visual representation of this complex, challenging, and often contradictory state, a genius trapped by their own introspection.
This raises an important question, I think. Why does this concept, and specifically Dürer's depiction of it, continue to resonate so strongly across centuries? Even today, in our, fast-paced modern world, it still speaks to us. Why?
That's a great question. Perhaps it's because Dürer tapped into something profoundly universal about the human experience. It's that inherent tension between our intellectual aspirations, our desire to understand, to create, to master, and our existential anxieties, that feeling of being burdened by knowledge, yet yearning for more. It speaks to the artist's block, the scholar's despair, the inventor's frustration. In an age of information overload where we constantly seek knowledge but can feel overwhelmed by its sheer volume and complexity, Dürer's melancholic figure, burdened by knowledge, seems more relevant than ever, doesn't it?
It really does. So, beyond its individual genius, what is the lasting legacy of Melancholia? How did it influence art history and our understanding of allegorical expression and the human mind? What ripples did it create?
Melancholia Surst is unequivocally one of art history's most impactful allegorical works, period. It's not just an image, it's a whole philosophical landscape compressed onto a single copper plate. It serves as a monumental summary of the intellectual spirit of the Northern European Renaissance, its unique blend of precise observation and profound symbolic meaning, and the artistic sensibilities of that entire era. It captures the very soul of a period, wrestling with new knowledge and old beliefs.
So it's far more than just a beautiful piece of art to be admired in a museum. It's almost like a statement, a manifesto of sorts for its time.
Far more. It's not merely an art object to be admired for its technical brilliance, though it absolutely demands that admiration. It is a profound reflection of the philosophical, scientific, and cultural debates that preoccupy the minds of Dürer's contemporaries. It encapsulates questions about the nature of knowledge, the sources of creativity, the inevitability of mortality, and the very essence of human consciousness in a rapidly changing world. It's a visual encyclopedia of the thinking of its time, deeply rooted in the humanist and mystical traditions we discussed, and its sheer intellectual density has fueled centuries of interpretation and debate.
And its influence didn't just stop with Dürer's lifetime, did it? It resonated for generations, you're saying.
Not at all. Its lasting legacy is evident in its role as a key reference point for countless artists, writers, and thinkers in subsequent centuries. From Baroque poets grappling with human vanity, like maybe John Donne, to romantic painters exploring the sublime and the melancholic hero, think Caspar David Friedrich, and even modern philosophers and psychologists who still find new meaning in its layers, the imagery and concepts within Melancholia have been revisited, reinterpreted, and built upon again and again. It seeped into the cultural consciousness as the quintessential image of intellectual melancholy, the archetype of the burdened genius. It also inspired a whole lineage of printmakers who sought to emulate Dürer's technical prowess, pushing the boundaries of what could be achieved with a burden on copper. Many artists tried to solve its symbolic puzzle, offering their own visual or written interpretations, which is testament to its enduring power to provoke thought and discussion.
So it really established a completely new benchmark for representing this complex state, not just in art, but maybe in how we even think about melancholy.
It's exactly. It established completely new benchmarks for the representation of melancholy in art, moving beyond simple personifications to a nuanced, multifaceted portrayal that encompassed both its divine inspiration and its paralyzing despair. And more broadly, it significantly expanded the boundaries of allegorical narrative in visual art. It demonstrated how intricate ideas, abstract concepts, and deep psychological states could be conveyed through a meticulously constructed symbolic language. It taught future artists how to tell complex stories not just through actions and figures, but through objects, atmosphere, and the very texture of the image itself. What's truly fascinating here is how a single engraving made over 500 years ago could achieve such enduring power. It became a kind of Rosetta Stone for understanding both art and the human psyche in the Renaissance, and it continues to spark dialogue and introspection even today. It stands as a testament to the idea that some of humanity's deepest intellectual and emotional struggles are timeless, and that art can be a powerful mirror to reflect them back at us.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Albrecht Dürer's Melancholia III is far more than just an old engraving hanging in a museum. It's a profound deep dive into the very complexity of the human mind, the exhilarating challenges and crushing burdens of creativity, and our unending, sometimes overwhelming quest to comprehend the universe. It's a powerful reminder that some of the most universal experiences, like deep contemplation, existential angst, or even that frustrating moment of creative block, have been pondered and portrayed with astonishing depth for centuries.
Absolutely. This piece, with its technical mastery and philosophical depth, remains an absolute masterpiece that continues to invite us to ponder the very nature of our intellectual and creative existence. It challenges us to consider, is melancholy primarily a burden, a paralyzing weight that keeps us from action? Or is it, as the Renaissance thinker suggested, an essential catalyst for profound thought and creation, a necessary state for true genius to emerge? Or perhaps, as Dürer so brilliantly depicts, is it inextricably both? That tension again.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, the learner, the next time you feel that contemplative quiet, that deep ponderance, where ideas swirl but action feels distant, or even a moment of creative stagnation where inspiration seems just out of reach, perhaps you'll recognize a touch of Dürer's Melancholia I within yourself. It truly asks us to consider, what is the true nature of creativity when it brushes up against profound thought? And how does the human mind navigate that fascinating, often challenging intersection between brilliance and its own inner weight? It's a question that continues to echo through time.